Welcome to the channel where we dissect 20th century literature and look at why rich people always win over poor people. Or maybe that's what I feel like this entire channel is becoming based on this reading challenge. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read really good and draw pretty darn bad. Today we are on a psychological journey where we delve deep into a dangerous game between a very narcissistic young man and an eccentric, conniving millionaire with a dark past. Welcome to the book review of The Magus by John Fowles. And just so you know, I am doing a 100 book challenge where I'm reading the top 100 novels of the 20th century by the Modern Library. Actually, they're not by the Modern Library. It's a very controversial list, and I'm gonna have lots to say as we get closer to books 80 and 70 and 50 whenever I eventually get there. First, a quick TLDR summary. This book is about a young man named Nicholas Urfe who's teaching abroad on the Greek island Phraxos. Set in post-World War II Greece, this island is magically and mysteriously disconnected from the rest of the world. He eventually learns of an old man who lives as a recluse, and Nicholas investigates to find out more, and then the deadly games begin. Now, for the main characters of this book, we have Nicholas Urfe. This Englishman is a bit of a narcissist and has some deep commitment issues with women that we will explore later in the review, but needless to say, he goes all the way across this island, searching out all the adventures and mysteries he can, sort of like a Scooby-Doo gang member. He prides himself on being a cynical realist who is smarter than the average day man. The second main character in the book is Alison Kelly, Nicholas's off-again, on-again girlfriend who he falls in love with in England, breaks up with, goes to Greece, she comes to Greece, he breaks up with her again, and then they fall in love again. Then we have Maurice Conscious, the wealthy intellectual that invites Nicholas to play these dangerous games with him. And lastly, we have Lily, the young woman that Nicholas falls head over heels in love with in Greece. She's someone who works for Maurice as one of the actors in one of the games that he's playing throughout the book. However, she goes by many disguises and many names, and it's also confusing because Lily has a twin sister named Rose, who we sometimes don't really know who we're talking to. Is it Lily? Is it Rose? And there you have a very strange love interest in this book. This novel explores themes of personal identity, love, and a Freudian and Jungian take on the psyche, which sounds very complicated, and I promise you in the book it's even more complicated. This book is also notable as an early example of metafiction. Here's a quote I pulled from the Oxford Research Encyclopedia to help us understand metafiction a little better. In 1960, critics were complaining that the novel, an 18th century form, might no longer be adequate to express the different scientific and philosophical theories that had changed the way that we view reality today. The transformations in mind were scientific and philosophical, involving such ideas as relativity in physics, uncertainty in scientific method, and any number of philosophies that challenged the centrality of human intellect in the world's doings. The Magus was created and written during a time when many writers and many thinkers were trying to understand how the theory of the mind worked. And this subject of metafiction and scientific analysis is so large, so we're just gonna drop it in the university dumpster where it belongs. In the plot itself, we follow Nicholas from England to the Greek island of Phraxos, and this is where his adventure begins. Because what starts off as a sort of modern take on a self-exploration and self-discovery journey of him growing from a young man into an adult slowly turns into a psychological thriller as he begins to place bets and wagers with Maurice Conscious that he is smarter than whatever games Maurice Conscious can put together. Most importantly, Maurice calls himself the Magus, where he is someone who puts together illusions and in-depth trickery to try and make Nicholas believe whatever he wants him to believe. As the story continues, the games and mind-bending tricks between the two of them get stranger and more dangerous as each tries to intellectually one-up the other. The plot itself is a labyrinth of Nicholas's inner mental state, which goes from sad to confused to depressed to angry to horny, the whole circle over again, but definitely going back to horny a couple of times. So if you are a straight man, you will probably really enjoy this book because there are some very, very explicit scenes in this book that leave nothing to the imagination, but on the bright side are very well written. Now, you might ask, why does Nicholas get involved in this dangerous game with Maurice in the first place? Because Nicholas was convinced, and he says so several times throughout the novel, that his ability to be a cynical, rational thinking person should be enough to defeat a millionaire who, has a lot of money and maybe way too much time on his hands. Nicholas felt like he had something to prove in playing these dangerous games with Maurice about what's real and what's not on the island of Fraxos, because he felt that he had the right to challenge the sort of intellectual and moral superiority that Maurice constantly puts on display throughout the book. Nicholas is sort of the modern day everyman who wants to take on people who believe in magic or believe in powers that are exceptional or history that's exceptional, and to expose it for flawed and wrong as it truly is. If you wanted to understand the flavor of this book, imagining two people playing Othello, one white and one black, where at any point in the game you think that you might have won, and yet one false move or wrong move flips the entire board in the other person's favor. Especially because of the title, I think often of tarot cards when reading this book, because I see Maurice as the magician tarot card. And what that means is he is someone who masters the elements and uses them and his powers and all of the earthly things he controls to turn reality into what he wants it to be. And at many points in this book, if you read this book, you will think, wow, this man has a lot of money to make a big play out of nothing. The Magician card is considered the number one card, or associated with the number one. So it's the infinite card, the card that's the start and the end of all possibilities. And in the same way, Maurice plays games as a start and end of all possibilities. And this card points to both heaven and earth, where he has control over earthly resources, which then allows him to control the metaphysical and the theories in people's mind, the realities that people believe in, like he tries to do with Nicholas throughout the book. I thought of Maurice many times in this book as both crafty and mysterious, and sometimes somewhat of a dirtbag, but I think that comes from him being a millionaire, and maybe not as part of what the author was trying to do in the book. Again, talking about themes and sort of what is behind this book is really an essay on the theory of the mind. And when I say that, I mean that there are many times where we don't know if we're delving into the past, if we're still in the present, or if there's some future event that will happen that will make us believe something different is going to happen in the future in the book. This book overall is very confusing, and this author is a master of plot twists, and you will not see where this book is going next. And honestly, there were times I wondered why we went wherever this book was going at all. It is definitely a slow burn, and I should know because this book was over 600 printed pages. Thematically, this is about two different viewpoints connecting and colliding in the real world. And if we want to take the tarot analogy again, we might say that Maurice is the magician trying to connect all the elements in Earth to create the reality that he believes in. On the other hand, we have the fool, who would be considered Nicholas Urfe, and not just an actual fool, although many times in this book I did think he was a fool, but more like the Fool Tarot card, who is someone who sets on a journey to try and find out the truth and realities of this world, but there are many pitfalls and there are many dangers on the way. Maurice regularly creates little games with stories and mythologies in them to make Nicholas believe them, and the trick for Nicholas is to find the loose thread and to pull it all apart and explain that the whole thing was a trick, and that is how Nicholas is supposed to be able to win these little games that Maurice sets up for him. Now, on to the review. I wish that I could give this book a scathing review. But on the other hand, I also wish I could give this book a glowing review, a really glowing review. This is a flawed book that I think you may enjoy, and I put a huge emphasis on you may enjoy it. First, this book has many good things going for it. It is a sexy psychological thriller where you will never see what's coming next. It's just impossible. And there are many moments where you think Maurice has won this game or Nicholas has won this game, although I don't think Nicholas is a winner in any sense of the word in this book, but overall, I think that you will be very surprised once you get to the end of the book how this book ends. On the other hand, this is a slow burn book, and the problem with the slow burn book is exactly that. Thinking, when will they get to the point? When will this author ever find the point? But I think it was meant to confuse you as you went along and make you feel a sense of boredom, so that when the moment ratchets up and there is something very strange that happens, which happens about every 100 pages, it is very exciting, and the payoff is, for the most part, really worth it. But if you enjoy a trippy, psychological kind of thriller novel, this book might really be for you. It's sort of like a James Bond or a Sean Connery movie in really slow motion. The one criticism that I could give of this book is very dated and very messed up in the ways it portrays the individual women in this book. Nicholas's personality kind of comes off as someone who spends way too much time on men's rights forums and maybe not enough time in therapy about his parents' relationship and how he felt abandoned. And this becomes exceedingly clear the farther you get into the novel, as the contract that Lily has with Maurice is very binding, and they really want to keep with Maurice's money. All the women in this book want to be taken care of by some man, and it really comes off as really kind of gross. And most of the women in this book are treated as tools for the male main protagonist's goal within the book. Their agency is often diminished, even though, in all honesty, they seem like powerful, strong, smart young women. And some of the things that happen don't make a lot of sense if you think about how this book would really go if it was written by a woman, perhaps. So while I do think that the main protagonist is kind of a D-bag, there are moments where I did connect with him, and you started to see his intellectual depth and his interest in seeing the world as it truly could be. And I think here's one moment I have that I'll just read to you that I think really stuck out for me. Take this quote where he's right in the middle of his adventure with a sexy girl and a millionaire on a yacht. It's such a relatable situation. I stood between the two girls and felt acutely the fragility of not only the old man's extraordinary enterprise, but of time itself. I know I would never have another adventure like this. I would have sacrificed all the rest of my days to have this one afternoon endlessly repeated, a closed circle instead of what it was, a brief and tiny step that could never be retraced. If you particularly like philosophical novels that push the sense of the boundaries of reality by using words and a plot, this book might really be for you. But there are parts of this book that you just have to grin and bear to get through, and parts of this book I found very unpleasant, but if you can get to the end, you may really enjoy it. Unless you don't enjoy the ending, because I did not enjoy the ending, so I don't promise you will. Okay, I'm gonna stop there for now, but why don't you leave me something in the comments below about whether you like slow burn psychological thrillers like this book. If you like this review, please like, share, and subscribe. I love hearing great comments from people. Please hit that thumbs up button, it really helps me. And if you want to hit the bell notification, you can get notifications when I release a new video. Next time we will be delving into a very different kind of book that thankfully is a lot shorter, which is Ironweed by William Kennedy. Well, that's all for me this week. Thanks so much for watching. Stay curious, stay reading.